What's up guys, it's Nate True here, and in this video I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about using credit cards with YNAB. From interest, overspending, adding transactions, making payments, whether you carry a balance or pay off your card in full every month, we're going to cover it all. See, I know that handling credit cards are probably the most confusing part about YNAB, but by the end of this video, everything's going to be clear and you're going to know exactly what you need to do. So let's jump in. All right, so when you open up your budget, first thing you're going to want to do is set up your credit card account. Now, hopefully you've already added a few other accounts and maybe done your budget. If you don't know what I'm talking about or you've never even done this, I do recommend checking out my beginner's YNAB video before you watch this one. I'll link it in the description below and above so you can do that first. If you've already watched that video and you're ready to move on to credit cards, we'll do that now. So first, add your account. And for this video, we're just going to keep it unlinked so that we'll just do everything manually for now. You're going to select credit card. Give it a name. In this case, I'll choose Chase Freedom, and then whatever your current balance is on the card. For now, we're just going to say that we have a $1,500 balance, and then hit next. And then we're going to skip this for now because I actually want to do this manually, and I want to show you all the details of how to make sure that you're doing this correctly. So right now, just hit skip. All right. So here's our Chase Freedom. We have a $1,500 balance that you can see here. That is the starting balance, and we're ready to get going. Now for this example, I'm actually going to change the date and say the starting balance was the 1st of September because we're going to do some months moving around here in a bit, but your starting balance will be whatever day you start on. Now it's important to note here that we're not going to add any transactions that happened in the past. If you bought groceries last week, we're not going to add that. We're just going to add the starting balance of what's on the card right now, and then we'll focus on moving forward from here. All right, now you might be wondering how we need to budget in order to cover this starting balance on your card. Well, it depends on if you have the money already in your account and you're ready to pay the card in full, or if you don't have the money yet available to go ahead and pay the card off. If you pay your credit card in full every single month and you already have the money in your checking account and you're ready to pay this off, this step is super easy. Now, as a side note, you'll notice that I have $2,000 in the checking account right now, and if you look at the budget, you'll notice that I haven't actually budgeted any of this money. That's why this $2,000 up here says to be budgeted. We need to add it to our budget, but I haven't done that just yet. Like I said, if you're confused about any of this, go back and watch the beginner YNAB video and this will all make sense. But back to the credit cards. If you're ready to go ahead and budget for all of this $1,500 and pay off the card, then all you do is you'll simply add $1,500 to the Chase Freedom category that matches this credit card category right here. So when we add that, boom. So now we show $1,500 here in our available payment category, and it's ready and waiting to pay off this Chase credit card. Just like when you budget for other categories, like if you added $50 to propane here, this means you've earmarked $50 to spend specifically on buying propane. In the exact same way, you've earmarked $1,500 to specifically be used to pay off your Chase Freedom credit card. If this is your situation and you can already cover the starting balance on your credit card, then you're done. You do this, and then now you just need to account for any spending going forward because you've already accounted for all the spending currently on the card. Now, obviously, I know that a lot of people can't afford to pay off their credit cards in full right now. That's maybe part of the reason you're using YNAB to figure out how to get out of debt. So if that's you, you're not going to put $1,500 here. Instead, you're going to use a goal to try and pay off this $1,500 by a certain time. So after you set up the credit card account, you'll go to the budgeting screen, click this payment category, and then you'll come down here and click Create a Goal. When you do this, you'll notice you have two options here. Let's look at what happens if you choose to pay off the balance by a certain date. In this case, we're pretending that we're starting in September, and so let's try and choose February of 2019. That's 6 months from September. So when we do that, you'll notice that YNAB says, okay, you need to budget $250 more this month to stay on budget of getting there by February 2019. So all we need to do is add $250 right here. All right, and now YNAB says, hooray, you have matched your budgeting goal for the month. You're on track to pay off your card balance by February of 2019. And if you go forward, you'll notice that you have another goal to budget $250 more in October. So if you do that, then you'll notice then again, you'll have another $250 again in November to stay on track towards February 2019. What this means up here is that when you have $250 budgeted to pay towards this, you can't afford to pay all $1,500 off. That's fine. But you can make a payment of $250. That's what this green number right here tells you. It simply says that you have $250 in your checking account ready and waiting on standby to pay towards this credit card the moment that you want to. Okay, now if you didn't want to set a goal to be paid off by a certain month, you don't have to. You can also come over here, hit Edit, and change the goal to just pay a specific amount every single month. So if you wanted to, you could just choose to pay $150 a month. And now YNAB will tell you that you just need to budget $150 more this month to reach your monthly goal. If this is you and you're not going to pay off your card in full and you need to set a goal to try and pay off your card over time, you just need to make sure at the bare minimum that you're setting a goal to at least fund the monthly minimum. Hopefully, you'll be able to pay a lot more than the monthly minimum on your card, but I understand that not everybody can do that all the time. So at the very least, make sure you're covering enough each month to cover that minimum. Now, ideally, you would discipline yourself to budget for your credit card debt first. So let's say that you make a decision to budget $300 towards this debt this month. And then now you would just decide, I'm just going to figure out how to live on this $1,700 left over at the end of the month. When you make a point to build that discipline to budget for your credit card debt first, you're way more likely to get out of debt, and you're going to do it a whole lot faster than if you were taking care of all of your expenses and then just using the leftovers to pay what you can on your credit card. All right, now this next part is really important. This part was really confusing for me when I first started using YNAB, and I got a lot of questions on this in my last video about YNAB, so I want to make sure and drive this point home. Think about this. When you have money in a bank account and then you have a debit card and you go and swipe that debit card and spend like $200 on groceries, if you wanted to go and spend that same $200 on something else, you literally couldn't because the money immediately leaves your account when you swipe that debit card. But now, if you have money in that same bank account and instead you go and spend $200 buying groceries on a credit card, what happens to the money in your bank account? Nothing. Why? Because, well, you didn't actually spend the money. The credit card spent $200 on groceries for you, and then you made a promise to eventually pay the credit card company back. So now, if you wanted to go and spend that $200 in your bank account, you totally could because the money hasn't left your account yet. You haven't yet paid back the credit card company, so you could absolutely spend that money. This is how people go into credit card debt. They let the credit card company buy them stuff on the credit card, $200 of groceries in this case, and then they make a promise to pay them back. But before they pay the credit card company back, they spend their actual money out of their bank account. And so when the end of the month comes along, they don't have enough money to make the full payment to their credit card company. So the credit card company charges them interest, and then they try and pay it off in full maybe next month or the next. Okay, now I know that you probably know that. This isn't a new concept. You understand how credit cards work. But see, YNAB is one of the only, if not the only, budgeting tool that I've found that takes that real-life scenario of what actually happens with your money and applies it to the budget. Let's jump back in and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so here we are back at the budget. Now let's take a look at our groceries category. If I click on this, you'll notice that it's yellow and that I have a monthly funding goal of $400. It says $400 more needs to be budgeted in order to reach my goal. So let's go ahead and add $400 to this. Great, so now it turns green and we can see that I have $400 ready and waiting to be spent on groceries. Now, a second ago, remember we talked about the difference between buying something with a debit card versus a credit card. So let's see what happens when we use YNAB to buy groceries with a debit card. We'll go over to the checking account, hit add a transaction. We'll add a date, let's say September 5th. We'll add a payee, be Walmart. Expenses will be groceries. Memo just be groceries for the family. And let's say that we spend $200. So now we can see that we have $1,800 left in the checking account. We see $1,800 here, we see the working balances here, and that makes sense because we had $2,000, and then now we had a single transaction that's minus $200. So now let's see what happened when we go to the budget. So we can see here that we added $400 to be budgeted here. We spent $200. If we click this, we can see the date and the payee, etc., of what's going on. And then we can see that we have $200 left in our grocery budget. That's how much more we can spend this month on groceries. All right, so maybe now's a good time to make sure you understand these three columns. So this here's the budgeting column. Whenever you get income, you're going to use this money and put it in this column. And it's kind of like adding money to a category or to an envelope if you're familiar with that language. In this case, we've said $400 is the total amount that we're going to allow ourselves to spend on groceries this month. The second column gets updated automatically from YNAB. You're not going to enter anything here. Whenever you enter transactions into these accounts, YNAB is going to update it in the correct column. And in this case, we'll see that YNAB has updated it to say you spent $200 in this category this month. This last column is just the difference between these two. It says, look, you said you wanted to spend $400, you've already spent $200, so now you got $200 left over. That's all there is to it. This column turns yellow, like with a little pie chart in it, if you've added a goal to the category, but you haven't funded it yet in the budget. So for instance, in pet insurance here, I have $56 that I'm wanting to budget per month. But if I only add $30 to it, let's say, you'll notice that it adds a little pie chart that's a little over halfway, and it's still yellow. It doesn't mean that I can't spend $30. It's still a positive number. So I can still spend $30 on pet insurance this month, but I can't fully spend my $56 yet because I'm not fully funded. So then if I add $56, you'll notice, yay, it turns green. I've met my goal. So that's how this works. Now in a second, we're going to talk about overspending specifically on a credit card and why that's problematic and what to do about it. But when that happens, you'll see that this number is actually going to turn negative, and it's still going to be yellow, but it's going to be a negative number. So just hold tight on that. For now, we're going to go ahead and delete this transaction and then see what happens when we do this on a credit card. So let's go over to the credit card account, and just like the checking account, we'll add a similar transaction. Payee, groceries for the family, $200. So just like the checking account, we see that the balance did change. We had negative $1,500 on this credit card. That's how much we owed. And now we owe negative $1,700 on this credit card, $1,500 plus $200. So this is what happened on the card. Now let's see what happened to the budget. So right now it kind of looks the same, right? We had $400 budgeted, we spent $200, and now we have $200 left over. Seems like it did basically the same thing. But hold on a second. Didn't I say earlier that when you spend money on a debit card, the money actually leaves your account? But when you spend money on a credit card, you're spending the bank's money, and then you're making a promise to pay them back later. So if you're spending the bank's money, why did I lose my $200 here? Where did this money go? Because unlike the checking account, I didn't actually spend any money yet. See, this is where YNAB shines. This is why I'm such a fanboy of this program. YNAB mimics real life. Although you didn't actually spend the $200 yet, the credit card company did. You made a promise to pay that credit card company back for the $200 of groceries. So what YNAB did is it moved $200 out of the grocery category into, if you scroll up here, the Chase Freedom category. Now we can see that the Chase category shows us that we have $200 available to pay towards our credit card debt. This means that you can confidently make a payment from your checking account to your credit card and know that you have money there because YNAB's telling you with this little bubble here that, hey, you have $200 that is sitting aside, ready and waiting to pay against this credit card. Here, let's do one more quick example to really drive this point home. So let's go ahead and budget $56 for that pet insurance we talked about earlier. Then let's go ahead and let's pay for that pet insurance, all right? So we'll add a transaction, healthy pause, be pet insurance, and it'll be $56. All right, so we see that the balance went up, $1,756. If we go to the budget, we notice that we budgeted $56. We had a negative $56 in spending, and now we have $0 left in this category that we can spend this month because we've already spent the $56 here. So what YNAB did, and it did it correctly, it added $56 up here. So now you can see we have $256 ready to pay against our Chase Freedom credit card. The bottom line here is that when you budget money for groceries, like these $400, you're giving these dollars a job according to YNAB. You're telling them that, hey, these $400, your job is to buy groceries. But when you buy groceries on a credit card, you're not using those dollars. You're using the credit card company's dollars. So YNAB transfers the money from groceries to the credit card company payment category and effectively gives these dollars a brand new job. Now their job is not to buy groceries. Now their job is to pay back the credit card company for the groceries that they bought. Okay, now before we move on to credit card interest and overspending, I want to show you one more thing. I want to make sure you really understand the difference between your available payment amount, this number right here, and the balance that you have on your card. Eventually, down the road, you want these two numbers to be equal. This would mean that you have enough money in your checking account that you're only spending money on a credit card that you've already budgeted for and can cover. But again, I know that this isn't going to be the case, especially when you're just getting started. So let's be clear. The number here is how much you owe on the card altogether. It's the total balance of your credit card spending that you haven't paid for yet. And this number here shows how much literal money you actually have in your account that's ready to pay towards the credit card. You can see that we owe $1,756, but only have $256 available to pay. That's because we had a starting balance of $1,500 on this card. And remember, I showed you how to deal with this at the beginning, but then we deleted these transactions. So now we haven't dealt with it. If we added the $1,500 here, you would see that now these two numbers equal each other. And that means that we have enough money in the checking account and we've budgeted that money, earmarked it, given it a job, however you want to say it, to specifically be used to pay off your credit card. Obviously, this is the long-term goal. We don't want to have any credit card debt. We want to always have the money ready to pay off those credit cards. But for now, until that day comes, I just want you to understand this is the balance on the card. This is how much you can actually pay towards the card right now. Woo! All right. So now you know how to add credit cards to your account and add transactions. But what happens if you do some spending in a category that you haven't budgeted money for yet? What happens if you overspend? Let's check it out. So go back to your Chase Freedom. We'll add a new transaction, and let's see, we'll go Shell, say gas for the truck, and we'll say we spent $50. Now, as expected, you saw the balance of the credit card went up by $50, but a new thing happened. We have this new little overspending thing right up here. It says $50, and it's yellow. That means that we have overspent this credit card by $50 according to our budget. But speaking of, let's see what happened to the budget. So if you come down, we're in October now, if you come down to the gas category and you click on it, you'll notice that we have no money budgeted for gas. We have a negative $50, and now we have this yellow negative $50 in our available column, and there's this like credit card with like an exclamation point little icon next to it. This tells us that we've spent negative $50, we've overspent $50 on a credit card. YNAB is telling you here that you need to budget $50 to this gas category in order to cover this overspending. Otherwise, you won't have enough money up here in your Chase Freedom payment to actually pay back the credit card company. Now, if you notice, YNAB didn't move this $50 up here yet. We still have this $256 that we can pay towards our card, and they left this $50 down here. That's because you've told YNAB that you don't actually have the money in your checking account to cover this spending. Even though you do, right here, right? We just haven't budgeted for it yet. So let's say that you did spend this money early on in the month and then you got paid later in the month and now you're able to cover it. So all you do now is just simply send $50 to your gas category. And when you do that, this goes to zero. You have no more money in gas that you can spend this month because you budgeted 50, you spent 50, and it took the 50 here and sent it up here. Now you actually have $306 that you can budget and send to pay off your credit card. It basically does the exact same thing as if you had budgeted the money first and then spent the money on a credit card. So that's what happens if you overspend on a credit card, but then you end up having enough money to cover that spending later on in the month. But what's super common, especially if you're struggling to get out of debt, is to spend on a credit card and then not have enough money in the same month to be able to cover it. Let's see what happens in this case. So let's go back to September and we're going to go ahead and budget out the rest of this money. We'll send $75 for pet expenses here. We'll do $50 for clothing. Go ahead and do $750 on these campground fees here. We'll add $492 for the Airstream payment. And let's just send the rest to unexpected for now. All right, so we're out of money. Let's say that it's September and we've budgeted all of the income that we're going to receive this month. But what happens if we end up having to spend $100 on our pets instead of the $75 that we budgeted? So let's go to Chase Freedom. We'll add a transaction. And we'll say Petco, pet expenses, pet emergency, and we ended up spending $100. Now you can see that when you look here, we had $75 budgeted, we spent $100, so we have negative $25. This means we've overspent this category by $25. Now, the good news is that, as you can see, we haven't spent some of our other money. It looks like we have money left over in groceries and money left over in clothing. So if we want, we can just tell YNAB to go ahead and cover this overspending with money from another category. In this case, I'll click here and tell YNAB that I want to cover it with clothing money. So click that, hit OK, and boom. YNAB added $25 here. It took $25 away from our clothing budget, and it increased the amount that we're able to pay by a whole $100. Remember, this was $256 a moment ago. We spent $100, and it was all budgeted for. So now YNAB said, great, you have another $100 that you can use to pay off your credit card with. So that's what happens when we're going to borrow money from another category. But what happens if we can't borrow money from another category? Now, let's pretend that for some reason we can't borrow money from all these other categories. We're just going to leave clothing alone. We're going to leave groceries alone. We can't borrow money from it. Yet, unfortunately, we still spent $100 on this category that we only had $75 in. So we overspent by $25, but we're not going to borrow from another category to cover it. So what happens now? Well, if we click over to October, you'll notice that when you don't spend money on a category like clothing, it just carries it over. You had $50 left at the end of September, so great. You still have $50 in October. Same for groceries. You had $200 left that you could spend at the end of September. You still have $200 this month. But if you look at pet expenses, oh crap, it's gone. There's no negative 25 here. Why did YNAB not carry over that negative 25? Seems like this money got lost somewhere in between September and October, but actually it didn't get lost. YNAB just wants you to pay attention to it in a different way. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say that we get another paycheck. So now we're going to add a paycheck for October. So let's say that we got a big paycheck and we're going to add another $2,000 to our income here. So let's go over to the budget, and again, let's pretend that we don't actually have some of these expenses that we actually do, because I want to prove a point here. We're going to go ahead and add $1,500 to our Chase Freedom credit card to cover that original starting balance that we talked about at the beginning. But now if you notice, remember when we did this earlier, these two numbers matched, but now they don't. This says $1,831 and this says $1,856. But we added the $1,500 to cover the starting balance, and we budgeted for the money we spent here, so why aren't these numbers matching? Well, that's the problem. Remember, we didn't budget for all of it. This right here, we only budgeted for 75 and we spent 100. So now if we pay close attention, these numbers are actually off by exactly $25. This is where our missing $25 went. When you overspend on a credit card in YNAB, like here, negative 25, YNAB doesn't carry that on to the next month and say negative 25 here. No. YNAB wants you to say, all right, you didn't have enough money to cover it in the month that you spent it in, so now you need to pay the credit card company back directly. We're not going to do the fancy magic transfer stuff for you. You need to pay attention to what you're doing and pay the credit card company back. Again, like everything YNAB does, this is done to mimic real life. You're paying the credit card company for borrowing that extra $25 that you didn't have in your checking account. So at some point down the road, hopefully sooner rather than later, you need to send $25 more to your Chase Freedom card and account for that overspending. And now, boom, $1,856. You now have enough money to pay off this card in full, and you are all caught up on your YNAB budget for the credit card overspending. So again, if you overspend on a credit card and you have enough money to cover it in this month, you just borrow from another category or send money from to be budgeted if you have it there to cover. But if you overspend on a credit card and it carries over to the next month, you won't cover it with this clothing money by sending it to the category that you overspent on. Instead, you'll need to send money directly to the credit card payment category on the card that you overspent. So as you can see from this, if you were only ever spending money on a credit card that you had already budgeted for, you would never actually need to add any money to this budgeting category right here for the payment, because you would budget for it here, and then when you spent it on a credit card, YNAB would move it from here up to here. And as long as you don't overspend, you would never ever even have to worry about this right here. All right, we have covered adding your account, how transactions work, and overspending. Next on the list is how to deal with credit card interest. The good news is YNAB makes this super easy to handle. No crazy math, no percentages, no APRs, just one single, simple, straightforward category. Let's check it out. All right, so rather than trying to do complicated math and calculate interest every month, YNAB makes this super easy. All we're going to do to deal with interest is first create a new category group. Let's call it interest and fees. And then underneath this category group, we're going to add a specific category called credit card interest. Next, at the end of the month, you're going to look at your credit card statement and look for the line item that's credit card interest. If you're carrying a balance every month, they're going to charge you that interest. Then you're going to go into YNAB for the credit card, in this case, the Chase Freedom, and we'll add a new transaction, and you're just going to call it interest. Now here, you want to choose the category of credit card interest under the interest and fees that we just created. So we're going to say credit card interest for September. And then let's say that the interest this month was $20, and then just hit save. And of course, just like any other overspending, we'll need to make sure that we budget for this interest. So in this case, we'll add $20 right here. And now we're good to go. We treat it just like we would any other transaction. We budgeted $20, we spent $20 on credit card interest, and YNAB moved that $20 to the credit card payment category so that we have enough money here to actually pay off the credit card, including the interest that they charged us. The nice thing about when you're tracking interest like this is that it really makes it super obvious how much money that you're wasting because you're in debt. It helps motivate you to just get rid of that debt and pay it off because you see how much money the credit card company is charging you every single month. Jesse, the founder of YNAB, explains it this way, and I really like it. He says, when you can't afford to pay off your card in full, you're basically making a deal with the credit card company and saying, hey, I need just a little more time before I can actually pay all this off. And because of that, I guess I'm willing to pay a fee for that extra time. In the same way that you go and buy groceries by making a transaction, this credit card interest is like you buying time. And the credit card company is obviously happy to give you more time and charge you more money for that time. So just treat interest like you would any other expense, because that's basically what it is. It's you buying more time to pay off your debt. Now, some people have asked what to do if you have interest on multiple cards. Do you need to create like a new category for each card? And the answer is no. So let's say that I also had $20 of credit card interest on my Visa. Well, I just would choose the Visa account, and then I would still do the exact same thing. Choose the same category. I would add interest for September or whatever month it is, and then add $20 here. And then now when I go back to the budget, you'll notice I spent $40. So again, $20 overspending. Let's make sure and budget for all of that. And great. So now what YNAB has done is it kept $20 on the Chase Freedom, but it correctly moved $20 to the Visa card up here. So now we have this Visa card payment category. So now we have $20 earmarked and ready to pay off the Visa card, just like we have $18.76 ready to pay off the Chase Freedom. So you don't need a new category if you have multiple cards. One category is fine. Just make sure you add the interest to the correct card. Okay, so we've covered a lot with credit cards, but one thing we haven't yet talked about is how you actually pay these darn things off. So let's do that now. When you're ready to make a payment on your credit card, first you want to check this credit card payment category like we've been talking about this whole time and see how much you can actually afford to pay against your credit card. Then you can decide if you're going to pay all of it off or if you're just going to pay part of it. Now keep in mind that YNAB doesn't actually necessarily track your statement balance. If you're confused about statement balance versus credit card balance, I have a credit card video that explains all that. I'll link it below and above. But the point here is that YNAB's balance, this right here, this working balance, this is the total balance on the card. And ideally, if you've been spending money that you have already budgeted for, then you're going to have the money in your checking account ready and available to pay this card balance off at any point if you want to. This means that this number right here, this how much money you can pay towards this credit card, is probably going to be higher than your statement balance. And that's fine. That's totally okay. That's actually a good thing. The big thing is you just don't want to pay more than this against your card because according to the budget, you don't have it. But I'm getting sidetracked. Let's say that we want to make a $1,000 payment towards this credit card. What do? Well, first, go into your checking account and you're going to add a transaction. Now, this right here is a key part. The payee is not, I repeat, the payee is not a credit card payment. This is what I see all the time. People do credit card payment for their payee, and then they try and figure out what category, and they're not entirely sure, so they don't know. So maybe they create a payments category, and then they come over here and they say $1,000, and great, and they hit save. This is not the way to do it in YNAB. If you do this, everything's going to be screwed up. When you make a credit card payment in YNAB, it's not a regular transaction. What you want to do is in the payee, you're actually going to make a transfer. So in the payee section, you'll notice up here at the top that there's this payments and transfers that you can choose from. And you can actually select the Chase Freedom account that you want to pay off. And when that happens, you'll notice that there's no category needed because you're not spending the money really. You're just transferring the money from your checking account to the credit card company to pay off the balance. So now you can just add a note if you'd like, pay down credit card, and then add the total amount payment that you want. In this case, since you're in checking, it's going to be an outflow from your checking and hit save. And now you can see that the checking account went down by $1,000. We had $4,000 in here. Now it's $3,000. And if you go to the credit card, you'll notice that we have a $1,000 inflow to the credit card, and the total balance of the credit card also went down by $1,000. And of course, if you go to the budget, you'll notice that now the Chase Freedom, you don't have $1,876 that you can pay towards the Chase Freedom. You only have $876 because remember, you just paid $1,000. So we're good in every single area. Now, the cool thing too is that if you want to make multiple payments a month, you can totally do that. You don't have to only pay your credit card once a month. You could make a new credit card payment every single week if you wanted to keep that balance down. You'll just do a new transfer every week. That's fine. Now, if you want another quick little pro tip, one thing that I like to do is to go ahead and actually add the due date in the credit card account name. You'll notice that YNAB doesn't really keep track of when you're supposed to pay your credit card. They just keep track of the transactions. So let's say that you have to pay your credit card by the 15th of every month. You could just add the 15th right there. And then now every time you look at your credit card, you'll notice that, hey, the 15th. So that helps you remember that you need to pay off your card by then. Boom. So there you have it. That's how you do credit cards with YNAB. Now, if you liked this video and found it helpful, please let me know in the comments down below, and don't hesitate to ask a question if there's something that you still don't quite understand. I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you have. As always, subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, and if you're serious about getting ahead with your money, do remember that I can teach you how to map out your budget, but I can't make you do it. The choice is yours. I'll see y'all next time.